All right. Hey, good afternoon. This is Dr. Brian with Dallas Synergy Chiropractic. At some point in time, you'd signed up for my workshop, Decoding Neurodevelopmental Disorders, or Unraveling Neurodevelopmental Disorders, just renamed it. And maybe you didn't make it. And I've also had, a parent come in and say, hey, I wish my spouse could have been here. Is there any way you have any recordings? And so I'm doing this as well. And then I apologize to those in the Eventbrite. I don't run the Eventbrite and Facebook stuff, but unfortunately, my old address, which is basically right next door, is being put in there, and we can't figure out why. And so I know a few people have gone back to the old address and has been caught. So I apologize for that. I am really sorry. I don't set any of that up. I've hired somebody to do that, and unfortunately, that is not coming through. So I apologize for that. But I wanted to do this for you. I'm wearing my Dallas hat. The Stars won last night. We're going to, game 6, right? So I'm rooting for them. They're going to do it. I have a gut feeling that they're going to do it. I got my Packers shirt on the Sunday afternoon. I wanted to shoot a short video for you. I'm going to make it as short and sweet as possible for you. But I wanted to give this to you because, let's be honest, it's been a stressful year. And we're going into some stressful times. And you say, well, what are we going into? Well, I'll tell you right now, any year, 2018, 2019, doesn't matter what year it is, anytime we start going into this holiday season, starting with Halloween, and oftentimes all the sugar related to that, and then 3-4 weeks later, we got Thanksgiving. I'm right there with you. I love my pumpkin pie. I have a problem when it comes to pumpkin pie. So, I love it. And they've got all that food. And then we got Christmas. And, growing up in Southeast Wisconsin, we got, there's just, I don't know if it's an everywhere thing, but I mean, I think every aunt, uncle, cousin brought cookies, right? And just incredible cookies. So you basically get 3 months where there's junk, we eat a lot of junk, right? Maybe additional junk, whatever. And then there's all the traveling that goes on with that. And then, we call it the cold season, but really what's going on is we're eating poorly. There's some other stressors that's going on with traveling and all sorts of other stuff. And maybe our sleep isn't as good and all that. And so there's a cold season going on. So there's a lot going on this time of year. People aren't feeling well because their diets are changed. The sun isn't staying out as long, so we're not getting as much vitamin D or sunlight. And our sleep is starting to change. And then, in the U.S., we always do this, wacky daylight savings time, so that can kind of screw with our sleeping schedule. And so this time of year, no matter what, it's a stressful time. And so this is when I get a lot more phone calls. During the summertime, it's pretty, things slow down. People are more relaxed, they're on vacation. We don't have the stress of school and academia and all of that stuff. The weather's a little bit better. There's a little more sunlight. We're getting more vitamin D. We tend to be outside more. So look, we're entering into this season of stress. That's what I call it. It's not a cold season. It's a season of stress, okay? And because of that, I wanted to make sure that you all got to see this because I am going to be Nostradamus here in the fact that you are going to start seeing your kids' behavior probably digress for a little while. At the very least into the middle of January, if not February, because there's that lingering effect post holiday, post New Year, as we drag out from, all the things that we're eating and all the traveling and seeing the families, and we get a couple weeks of maybe some downtime, from going to school and then going back to school. There's a lot of stress here, okay? And so you see this perfect storm. And I want to talk to you about, there's 3 stressors that I'm going to talk about, okay? Physical stress, chemical stress, and emotional stress, okay? And we each have a gradient or spectrum of those stressors that we can handle, right? Like, for instance, I'll give you an idea of a stress. Like, exercise is a stress, right? Like, hey, Brian, could you go run, the length of this parking lot? I could do it, right? I wouldn't collapse at the end of it, right? Maybe if I sprinted, you might be a little heavy-winded, but I could do it and then go function, right? Like, I wouldn't have to go take a nap, right? But if you ask Brian to go run a marathon, a different stressor, right? A much longer, in-depth stressor, I'm taking a nap afterwards, right? I'm not doing an Ironman. That's a stress, right? And so we have this spectrum. I could run a few miles, but I'm not going to be able to run a marathon at this point in time. Just not efficient enough. Not, I'm not a big runner, so I'm not going to be running all the time. Okay. The same with weightlifting. I'm just trying to give you the idea that we have these stressors, right? There's chemical stresses. I already talked about that with the season that's coming up, with all of this stuff coming on, right? And so, look, there's a lot of chemical stress that's going to be happening. Food dyes, processed foods, whatever it may be. A lot of gluten and dairy is introduced, or we tend to struggle to avoid that this time of year, right? And so this is all going on, okay? And so that is a chemical stress. Then we have emotional stress. And emotional stress can, there can be lots of different reasons for that, right? We can have emotional stressors for lots of different reasons. There could be poor gut health and the anxiety that involves with that, and the inflammation, and then going to school, and maybe not, the anticipation of maybe having to wear a mask all day. There's that stress there, right? And there's the parents are stressed too, right? Because do I put my kid in school? Do I not? Or we have a bunch of split. I'm seeing a bunch of split schedules, 2 days in, 2 days out, sort of deal. Or there's all sorts of variations that I'm seeing. Or should I homeschool? There's a lot that goes into this, right? And so, look, these are the three stressors, and all of us have some sort of uh, boundaries on either end, right? Okay, so there's a spectrum that we can handle so much stress. A joke in our family, right, is when one parent starts getting a little hangry, right? Like when our blood sugar's dropping a little bit lower. Yes, there's a stressor there, right? Like I was in a hurry and I didn't eat breakfast, or whatever, and the chemical stress of not getting the nutrition I needed, not the enough nutrients to fuel me for this time. I get hangry. This works me into something else that I really want to emphasize, okay? And please take note of this, because this is so vital. Like typically I get kind of three different people that come to my workshops. One, parents. So if you're a parent, please pay attention to this. Two, teacher. Please, please, teachers, pay attention to this, because I don't believe teachers have enough resources to help. And oftentimes the burden's put on the teachers for this stuff. So please pay attention. And then thirdly, I often get other healthcare professionals or other chiropractic students coming in. So pay attention to this as well. But the parents and the teachers, look, all behavior has a purpose. I'm going to repeat that, because this is what I need you to see. This is the 30,000-foot view, okay? All behavior has a purpose, okay? So let's extrapolate from this, because I think this is so important. Look, Johnny's behavioral changes, Johnny's behavior has a purpose. Just like when I'm hangry, right? When I'm ornery because I haven't eaten, my attitude, my behavior has a purpose. There's a chemical stressor on me. My body is saying, I need more sugar in my blood, okay? And, whatever, we don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole, but it's saying, I'm low. And it's manifesting itself in, maybe been a little, snippy with my wife, or maybe with the kids. We've all been there as parents, right? So it happens, okay? No judgment. But you have to understand that. Like, you get this, you get it. You understand. You've been there before, where you're like, ooh, my behavior probably wasn't as, I snapped and I shouldn't have, right? I yelled at the kids and I shouldn't have. I was just hungry, and I didn't mean it. It's happened, right? Same thing with kids. Kids get ornery when they're hungry too. Our kids' behavior changes. So my point here is, look, behavior has a purpose, and I think oftentimes really good kids who are really stressed out, they get labels of defiance, or being punks, or being bullies, or whatever. And I think a lot of good kids are really just struggling, okay? And their behavior is them attempting to manage, gain control, deflect from stressors, okay? And I think this is so important, okay? And so, look, there was a 15-year-old, and mom would give her chores and give her work to do, right? Okay, so this is a real story. And she never did it, right? Your mom would be like, go up, get changed, start your homework. I want you down here by 6:30. You're gonna help me, put dishes on the table and we're gonna eat dinner. Okay, that sort of deal, right? She doesn't do that. She goes upstairs. Next thing you know, she hasn't done her homework and it's 6:45 and she's still not down. Mom says, you're defiant. Okay, well, this girl, she struggles with auditory processing, meaning she struggles to take in information into from an auditory sense, right? So hearing. She struggles to take that information in, understand it, process it, and essentially follow through on that list of commands. Sorry, it's so different when I'm talking to a camera versus people. So I'm trying to make sure that I'm still on the camera and not. But listen to me there. She looked defiant. She looked like she was being disobedient. She looked like she was, you know, just, this bad kid, right? Like, just like, oh, doesn't want to listen, doesn't want to obey her mom. In reality, she struggled to process the information. She struggled, and if you think about that, when you looked at this girl's academics and she struggled with in-class assignments, you wonder. You see what I'm saying here? Like, we're seeing what's going on. She's not really defiant. She cannot take in the information and chunk it up the way that she needs to fulfill what she's supposed to. Okay? And so it's defiant looking, but it's not defiance. It's, I can't understand this information, break it down, and then follow the commands. But you look defiant. So I want you to understand this because behavior has a purpose, okay? It's not meaningless. There's a reason. Just like the wiggles in ADHD, right? The movements and the twitches, there's a purpose to that, right? There's a purpose, when you see an autistic kiddo and they come in and they touch everything in the room. There's a reason for that. They're orienting themselves. They're getting control of their environment, okay? These are important things. We have to understand this stuff because if we do not, then we mistake behaviors and symptoms as something else. We can do that very, very easily. And so I want you to understand this big takeaway here. Behavior has a purpose. It has a purpose. And if you can look from the 30,000-foot view, if you can understand that, hey, when I understand my child's behavior, like, hey, you know what? Like one of the common ones that I hear, and it goes both ways, but like, I remember this dad came in and the daughter would, you talk to the teacher, she's an incredible student. She pays attention. She's very diligent. She doesn't talk to the other students, and she's, she looks like the ideal student, right? But the moment that she gets into the car with dad, right, and brother, boom, an explosion, just looks defiant, angry, mad. But you talk to the teacher and she's the sweetest angel in the world, right? That little girl, she was struggling to hold in. She willed herself to maintain the auditory and the visual processing and the sensory systems that she had to do. She held it together until she didn't have to, and then she explodes. So to dad, she looks like she's being disobedient and having attitude issues. But this poor girl is struggling in school to process the auditory information, to process the visual information, okay? She's struggling. It's hard for her. She's very inefficient at this. And because she's inefficient, it takes up a lot of her energy and resources. So the moment she isn't in that demand, the demand of school and having to pay attention and listen and read and understand this all, boom, a volcano, a storm erupts, a tornado just like this, okay? And so I want you to understand this. Our kiddos, look, they're, I don't know if you ever heard the canary in the coal mine, but the canary in the coal mine is the idea is that canaries were more sensitive to carbon monoxide than the miners, okay? The miners would take them into the coal mines, and if they hit pockets of carbon monoxide, this is my understanding, I wasn't a miner back 100 years ago, but the canary would die because they're more susceptible, right, to the stress of the carbon monoxide, right? And so they would die, and it was a warning system. I'm telling you right now, our kids are telling us that the stressors that we're under, the poor exercise, the poor nutrition, all this other stuff, the chemical and the emotional stress of mass. Because I don't know if you know this, but when you look at me and you see a smile, your brain interprets that. Is he friend or foe, right? Like you're able to read your environment, but when you mask this up, it's harder. So you have kiddos with autism who struggle socially to read facial expressions, right? And we have that happens in ADHD and other kiddos too. They have trouble reading the social cues. And now we've eliminated some cues. So we've made it harder for them, even harder for them to gauge socially what's going on. Stressor. It's an emotional stress. Okay, so look, there's a perfect storm brewing, okay? And that is we're stressed out physically, chemically, and emotionally. And that is leading to our most susceptible, the canary in our world. They're the ones that are being impacted at the developmental level, okay? And so that's why when we're seeing this increase, right? When we're seeing this increase in autism, right? I think it's like 1 in 36 or 1 in 39 in California. I think it's 1 in 10 in San Francisco. Okay, that's a staggering number. About 10% of the population of the kiddos in San Francisco have a autism diagnosis. All right, it's telling us something. So there's a storm brewing. The science knows that stressors, epigenetic stressors, like an epigenetic stressor. Epigenetics is the stress of the environment impacting genes. Okay, so whether genes are turned on or off based off of the environment. An easy example is when you exercise, when you go, lift weights or run, your body naturally turns on anti-inflammatory genes, right? It's part of the healing process. When you don't exercise, they don't get turned on. Well, think about this. We have highly processed foods which impacting the gut flora, okay? We're not exercising, so we're more inflamed, right? We're sitting, so our lymphatic system isn't pumping, right? We're not getting all the immune benefits of exercise. 40% of adults are sleep deprived. Sleep deprived. I think there's a car accident the number is staggering. I think every minute there's a car accident every minute in the United States based off of not getting enough sleep. So look, we got parents who are not getting enough sleep, who could be financially or emotionally stressed, right? Maybe, like with us, our son, it wasn't planned and my wife was in a stressful job. There's an epigenetic stress on our son, right? Versus with our daughter, it was different. So you have to think about all this stuff. Like, was the soil good during conception? Did they, was there good soil? Were they stressed out or was this all planned and perfect? And there was a couple here that were very high level, type A, high degrees, medical and lawyer, and the child was struggling from the moment of birth. Very intelligent, they're making good money. You would think that there probably wouldn't be as many stressors, right? But there absolutely can be. You have a high stressful job as in the medical field or as an attorney, and it can manifest itself in your kiddos. It will manifest itself. So anyways, think about stressors, okay? And when you think about stressors, think about all of us have some sort of spectrum of stress that we can handle. And if it exceeds it, we're going to see behavioral changes, especially. All right. So the plan here, help you be more aware of what's going on with your kiddos, what's happening, ideally answer some questions for you. Honestly, you're missing out if you're not in person, unfortunately, because in person you can ask me questions. So I try to answer, questions that I commonly get. But if you're not here, then I obviously can't answer it. So if you see another one coming up and you want to be in person, ask questions, please do that. And then there's always action steps, right? So look, knowledge is power. If you're a teacher or parent, knowledge here is very important, because if you have the knowledge and the understanding of why these kids are struggling, you can put in barriers that you can help them navigate what is going on, and you can help mitigate a lot of what's happening. One of the biggest things that we see this time of year is kiddos with poor body awareness. Okay, poor body awareness, so clumsy, not very coordinated, struggle with dance or sports, right? They have prediction issues. What? Yeah, so you go, if I tell you there's a bathroom in the office, not in the office, but down the hallway, it's about, I don't know, 50 meters, okay? About 150 feet. And if I told you that's where it is, it's right down the hallway, about 50 meters, in your brain, okay, I got 150 feet, you would have you would have an idea of how long it would take, right? Okay, it should take me, I don't know, about 20 seconds probably, right, to walk down that far, 30 seconds, whatever. And you're like, okay, at some point in time, your brain would say, this isn't right. No, I've gone too far. I must have missed something. This is taking way too long for me to cover that distance, okay? So essentially you have like a working memory based off of movement patterns and your understanding of how to navigate your world, okay? Um, and so, but kiddos who have poor body awareness, they're not very good with timing and rhythm. Because you see it in the dance, right? They cannot predict the next beat, right? They're not there. So they naturally have prediction issues. So when you're talking about this, and you're talking about reducing the stress and creating a knowledge, having a game plan for these kiddos, one of the big things I do is have parents write out what's going to happen during this holiday season, right? Like, hey, we're going to your uncle Tommy's house, okay? Do you remember we were there last year? Okay, you don't? Okay, well, here's a picture of Uncle Tommy. Okay, yeah. Do you remember him? Okay, yeah, maybe I do remember him. Okay, and remember, yeah, he's got his son, little Johnny, right? Okay, oh yeah, Johnny, I remember Johnny. This is assuming that you don't see him on the regular, right? But we're gonna go there. We're gonna go there. We're gonna get there at 10 a.m. Okay, so we want to leave the house about 9:30. Okay, and we're gonna be there at 10. Okay, and Grandma and Grandpa are gonna be there, and your uncle, JoJo's going to be there. I don't know. You tell them how their day is going to progress, and we're going to stay there. And around 2 o'clock, we're gonna have Thanksgiving dinner, right? Okay, there's going to be turkey, and Mom is bringing, Dad is bringing, pecan pie, right? And blah blah blah, and whatever. There's going to be a football game on, okay? And you kind of lay that out for them. You reduce the burden of them having to predict how that day is going to go, and you will see awesome changes in their ability, their anxiety to handle the day. Okay? And you also give them a game plan if it gets overwhelming. Like, hey, I know your cousin's going to be there, and if you feel overwhelmed, right? Like you feel like it's just too much, right? There's a lot going on, and there's going to be noises, and we're all going to be laughing and having fun, and there's going to be a football game in the background. Okay, here is your favorite book. Okay, if it gets too loud and too noisy and there's too much going on in the background, I want you to take this book, okay? And I'll show you where it is. But I talked to Uncle Tommy, and he said if you get overwhelmed, you can go to his office and read for a few minutes, okay? So what you've done is you've reduced the burden of them having to predict the day. You've also given them an escape route if it gets too much, right? Because when we become burdened with the stress of processing visual information and auditory information, and we're not good at it, boom, we deflect, we push away, we act out in an attempt to control our environment. Do you see why if like it could maybe look like they're being bad and just trying to be naughty, right? It's like why are you acting up? You got the food, you got the cake, I gave you everything you wanted. Why are you behaving this way? Well, if there's too much noise, you get 18 cousins there running around screaming. There's a football game, and the parents are all playing the game and having fun, right? That's a lot of information to process. Okay, and this is from personal experience. Like my family is loud. My wife's family is the opposite. The first time she came to my family's house, so there's four of us total. I'm the oldest, and my brothers would, there's like three TVs in my mom's house, and there'd be like three TVs on. My sister would be playing she's playing some music in the background, and there's the three or four of us hanging out, laughing, joking, and there's just a lot of noise and commotion. it was too much for her. She's like, I can't handle this, right? Like, she's like, how do you guys handle all this information? Then you get my cousins there who are just as loud, and it became chaos for her. She had to she had to sleep. She had to take a nap, right? She had to process. She had to get away, deflect, and take control of all the information. But for me, who's used to that, who grew up in that, it wasn't it wasn't bad. But for her, it was a lot. So look, the behavior is going to point to our efficiencies and our inefficiencies in being able to control our environment. Kiddos who are inefficient with auditory processing and visual processing it's gonna be tough for them in the classroom. I had a mom come in 2 weeks ago, and one of her kiddos, you know, both kids are very smart, but one kiddo knocks it out like this. Boom, 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 boom. Can just knock out their homeschooling, can knock out the information. The other can't. The other one was struggling. And so when you looked at the other child was inefficient with eye movements. And so reading would be very difficult. It would be hard for them to sit there and read a book efficiently when your eyes don't track well, right? And I don't mean acuity. I don't mean like, is your vision 20/20? I mean your eyes have to go across from left to right and then back. And they have to do this, and they have to pick up the information in a coordinated manner. Look, if your eyes are, they're at different angles and they're not catching the same information, your brain will do all sorts of stuff. You get kids all the time. I have them do like the H, right? You see at the optometrist, right? And or at the doctor or whatever, and their eyes will jet off and come back. They'll jet off and come back. Their brain's resetting. I cannot follow this object at this speed. It's too hard. Okay, I'm not efficient in going to the left or to the right, and so my brain resets all the time. You see it all the time, and so when you're inefficient, it's going to take you longer. It can look like you're not focused, because let's be honest with you, you're going to get burnt out at some point in time if it's hard for you to read, if you're inefficient at reading, and your eyes keep jetting back and forth. It's just hard. All right, let's keep going. All right. I'm from Southeast Wisconsin, so near Milwaukee. If you're from Wisconsin, I'm just south of Oconomowoc. Love science. I love to know the why, okay? And I'm a father of two, so I have a 4-year-old and the 3-year-old in December. All right, here's a video. So there may not be any sound, but the white team passed the ball 13 times. But there's a moonwalking bear in the background, and you'll get to see him here in a second. It may be a little hard with this, but with it being on the screen. But you can see him as he's walking in right here, kind of right in the middle, doing the moonwalk now. And the point of this video is, look, we're being bombarded with information, right? And sometimes we're just missing some very obvious information, right? And so that's hopefully I'm going to bring some awareness to things that you've seen and maybe wanted answers to. Okay. All right, so I'll be honest with you. The perfect storm, or these physical, chemical, and emotional stressors, can happen in fertility and pregnancy. Okay, mom and dad being stressed are epigenetic. They're stressors on the genes that they're sharing. Okay, so if dad's stressed, dad's not working out. Maybe mom and dad make really good money and have a beautiful home, and they can go on vacation for 2-3 weeks, but dad's high in sales, right? So he's always flying all over the place, having to eat out. His workout routine is tanked, and so look, we always, sometimes people think stress is like just like financial stress. Like if I had this much money, I'd be okay, right? Like it sounds in theory, but when we think about stresses, you have to think about the entirety of it, right? Like you have some well-off to do parents, right? Medical doctors and attorneys and all this stuff. The stress of those jobs ultimately impact the genes, okay? and they can impact fertility, right? Because if you think about it from a biological standpoint, if we're under high stress, is that the ideal time to conceive? I'm not saying it can't happen, but is that the ideal time to conceive? And you have to remember that the baby's is growing right inside the mom, and it's understanding the body. That little baby's understanding of the world is happening through the mother's nervous system and chemicals in her bloodstream and hormones in her bloodstream. Like it's understanding its environment. Is it coming into a stressful environment, or is it nice and peaceful and loving? And so you have to think about that all. And you think about like uh, birth process. Sometimes that can be stressful for some, right? And we were very fortunate. We had two. We didn't have them in the hospital. We had water births at a not a doula, but a midwife, and they were great. I mean, my wife Brittany was home within like 2.5, 3 hours. Our children were not poked and prodded right away. They cried, and so we were okay. We knew they were okay, and they got to lay on us without our shirts right away. So we got that skin to skin contact, and it wasn't stressful. My daughter's was really uneventful. Okay, my son's was a little bit more stressful. He had the cord wrapped around his neck, so as my wife was pushing, he got stuck. You could see him, and he was stuck. He was stuck. I don't. I honestly don't know how long it was. It felt like, I don't know, a week. But in reality, he was probably there for like 35, 40 minutes, and we were monitoring his heart rate. Not we, I was freaking out. But the midwife was, and we were, and eventually I think there was some tearing, and he got out. Okay, but my son was like awake like this. I mean, he was instantaneously awake. Boom, a lot. I mean, that's kind of stressful. You're stuck in the canal. There's a cord like essentially kind of strangling you, right? There's a little bit of stress. Even if you're not out of the birth canal, your nervous system's still collecting that information. My daughter, I mean, I asked my wife if we could return her because for the first 2 weeks, all she did was sleep. I mean, two different babies, and so that can be stressful. Unfortunately, they're prepping moms for this to be a painful, excruciating experience, and you'll have to have an epidural, and we got to schedule this, because if the baby isn't, born at 40 weeks, then something's wrong. There's this fear-driven thing. In reality, parents need to be supported in this and say, hey, this is a great experience. This may happen once, right? And we have more, but I mean, like, this is a unique experience that not everybody gets to have. And so when it becomes stressful, baby gets that sense from mom. So, and then we have interventions during birth, right? I don't know if anybody has seen like a C-section birth, but there's yanking and pulling. I should have a video on here that'll show that, but that can be traumatic. We also have like the 24, 36, 48 hour, labors sometimes, and you're being compressed for long periods of time. You also have the baby that just flies right out, and dad can barely catch him right in the car. And then you got stressed out colicky babies. Look, if your kid is colicky, it's a sign. I've read some stuff that colic may be an infant migraine, so it's interesting. So colicky is telling you something, right? Like there's some form of stress. Sick kiddos are telling you something, okay? I was when I was before the age of 5, asthmatic, okay? So inhaler, going to the hospital, spending multiple nights in the hospital, just kind of a stressed out kiddo, had a traumatic birth, okay? And just kind of lived on an inhaler. Got sick 2-3 times a year, high fevers. It would get so high. We were in the second story apartment complex, and my mom said I tried to climb out the window because I was just so delirious from the fevers and stuff like that. So she likes to remind me of that. One time I tried to jump out a 2-story window. But yet, at the age of 5, my mom didn't take me to get adjusted by a chiropractor. She just went, and then I wanted to get adjusted, right? Okay, mom did it, I wanted it. But I remember the relief that I felt after the adjustment. Like it was a unique experience in the sense that I just kind of like a pressure being relieved, right? And after that, never went back to the hospital. My dad wanted us to live within 5 minutes of the hospital because the attacks, he wanted to be able to drive there and circle the ER and see if I needed to go in. So, but by the age of 7, I hadn't had an attack in 2 years, and we were able to move out of the city into the countryside, or more country, right? Small little town. And so, from that aspect, it's pretty cool, right? Like, I mean, that's awesome. I still got sick. It didn't. The one adjustment was not the end all be all of what was going on, but what I know now is my rib cage is all twisted and distorted. I do have some rib issues because of I think the first 5 years of my life, the way that they were formed, from all that, there's a lot of twisting. And so what would happen is you would like, let's see, this way, you would like your lungs to compress evenly, right? Like this. Well, if you got rotation and compression, and one inflates and the other one, they're not even. There's a tension, right? Because that's really just like a vacuum in our chest cavity. It's a vacuum, so it's sucking air. But if you're not sucking in air evenly, it creates pressure differences, and I would get like this wrapping pain through my ribs. These, I call them stitches in the right side, and it sucked. But it would trigger these asthma attacks because when I was having allergy issues, or I would get like some sort of issues like cold and stuff like that, it would start triggering this stuff, right? Because I was already kind of decreasing the airflow from the sinus congestion or whatever else, or the infection, and then you go on top of that, and I'm it was what was needed to push me over the edge, right? So, but I want to tell you this: at the age of 22, 23, I can't remember now, I did ROTC and went to Fort Knox for a month of training because I was looking to go into the military, and I ran a 5 minute, 15-second mile. Because throughout high school, I didn't go to a chiropractor, and I always struggled with sports. It was just hard to run, but I still played, right? But in college, I started going to a chiropractor for some pains, and he helped me push over that edge, right? So I hadn't been to a chiropractor for a long time, but when I started going to him regularly, and we got more of that twist out and more of the everything that was going on along my spine, I mean, I could run very efficiently. 5 minute 15-second mile is really good when you go from a kid who couldn't run 100 yards when he was 5 years old because of asthma, right? But I hadn't been on an inhaler in 15 plus years, so pretty cool stuff. But sick kiddos, it's a sign, right? You're naturally designed to fight off infections. So it's not the kiddo that gets sick every now and then that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the kid that's getting sick all the time. I had a year and a half year old come in who had been on 8 antibiotics at 18 months. 8. That's every 2 months. That's insane. I mean, you haven't accomplished anything. I get that I'm not saying that there's never a use for antibiotics, but 8? I mean, there's a problem here. And I know the parents were eating well and other things, but there was a trauma. There was a reason why, okay? And so sick kiddos. And then you have the sensory kiddos, okay? And you'll notice a lot of sensory kiddos when they start crawling. They'll army crawl, or they'll scoot on one side, or they'll scoot on their butt, or they'll delay crawling, right? Those are signs that there's sensory stuff. So parents, you see this firsthand. You'll say, "Hey, I see this," and oftentimes, unfortunately, what's happening is you'll bring it up, but you'll be told they grow out of it. Not how things work in development. You don't grow out of things, right? That's what they said about my asthma. You'll grow out of it. Look, no, I didn't grow out of it. You grow out of something into something else. Look, the development has a trajectory, right? It follows a pattern. And the pattern is we have these things called primitive reflexes, which are reflexes that we're born with, right? That we develop in the womb that help protect us from everything from, like, there's one called the moral reflex, which is it essentially freezes the infant in the womb for protective reasons. There's one called the gallant reflex, which helps the baby wiggle out of the canal. There's STNR and ATNR, and they believe that's involved with rotation so that the baby can also wiggle out of the canal. And these reflexes, as the baby's brain develops and grows and they start gaining an idea of where they are in space and the brain starts developing, then those go away. Because this is how the brain starts developing. Baby's making all these noises, right, and moving. And baby says, Dada. Daddy gets excited, right? He's like, woo, he said daddy. And baby's like, okay, they like it when I make that sound, okay? Also, baby figures out that when I do this movement, I hit my face. And that's how the baby starts to understand the world. It's through the sense of movement and sounds and facial expressions, okay? But the big one here is we go from primitive reflexes to movement, okay? And so they hit themselves or they hit something or we squeeze their hand and they piece together the world through movement in the sense of self. So it goes primitive reflexes, gross motor movement, right? So this, and then it goes fine motor movement like, oh, I want to pick that up. And me picking it up helps me understand that I'm an individual and this is the distance between these two things and this is how I do it and all sorts of, so the baby's brain is collecting information and then piecing together the world. Well, when you see a baby crawl poorly or not crawl at all, then there's a couple different things. There's a sensory issue or a tone issue, and the baby's brain is not getting the information to create good motor movement and efficient motor movements. Ultimately, the motor, the gross and fine, go into balance and vestibular and auditory processing. So now they're starting to, balance and walk, right? And then you'll right around the 2, as their balance starts getting better and better, they start asking why. So they're starting to process their world. Why, Dad? Why? Like our little Tin, she's going on 3, but she's asking why all the time now. Why, Dad? Why? Why do we do this? Why do that? So her balance over the past few months has really improved. She's got way more coordinated in her movement, and now her brain is to the point where balance, it's not learning balance as much anymore, right? Balance isn't the issue. Now it's, can I balance and process the information, okay? And the next one is visual processing. And that's how we build our world. That's how our brain develops, okay? So when you see these things, poor gross motor, fine motor, poor balance, where you give them a list of chores to do and they can't do it. These are, you're seeing it, parents, okay? And then go on to visual processing. So basically when they have these primitive reflexes, and lots of kiddos do, like the ATNR and STNR ones, which are upper neck ones, they will struggle to cross the midline. Oftentimes this will look like dyslexia. Or because this reflex is there, as they go to midline and they try to cross over, their brain resets, and so they read over and over and over again, or they're very slow readers, or they read and they don't comprehend. They're not efficient with their movements, and their development got altered at some point, thus impacting their ability to function, their ability to go from left to right and interpret what's going on in the book. All right. So basically, at some point in time, when you're looking at developmental stuff, some stressors have stuck or impeded parts of the development. Either, oftentimes we're stuck in we have our brainstem, which is where our primitive reflexes are. So back here, the most basic part. And what you'll see is, I get this with our athletes, right? So you get like a soccer player or a QB who gets smacked in the head, gets a concussion. Football player, great QB, just a cool guy, great at academics, kind of your all-American kind of, athlete, person, whatever, great at academics, has a, girlfriend, A student, QB, lots of potential here, right? Gets concussed. So, and his academics start tanking, right? So something happened, right? And ends up breaking up with his girlfriend because he can't handle how emotional she is, something along those lines. That's what he said. I forget. But basically what's happening is he could not keep up with the stresses of academics, his girlfriend, and the sports. So he started missing his wide receivers, was having a lot of trouble focusing, started getting some headaches and migraines. But when you tested him, he had primitive reflexes. So look, didn't have primitive reflexes, gets smacked in the head, big old stressor, cranks his brain backwards, gets stuck. It's like kind of like resetting. So you have a 16-year-old who ultimately the mom is like, he acts like he's 2 or 3 years old. Not, was emotionally, pretty mature, right, for his age, not mature at all, just constantly picking fights with me and his dad. Ended up breaking up with his girlfriend because of this. Um, really struggling to get the plays down again and to hit the wide receivers that he needs to hit. He's really struggling with this, and he's ending up with like migraines after practices and stuff like this, and his academics, he's just not comprehending. Well, you look, his brain, that pushed him back. The impact pushed his brain back. I read a case study that just came out yesterday, and they talked about how there was like a 22-year-old girl who got in a motor vehicle accident. The whiplash caused some injury and trauma to the upper neck, and it caused reflexes to get kicked on. So traumas like this can push you backwards. So the problem here, though, is these kiddos, they have something called neuroplasticity, so they'll kind of adapt around some of these issues until a large enough stress puts a demand on them, like first or third grade. Usually first or third grade is when we start seeing some big issues, especially third grade, especially when they have eye coordination issues. So your eyes are based on, their coordination can be based off of the spine and the postural tension there. And so if you have poor tone, poor posture, your neck tension is stuck, really tight, there's whatever going on there, it can ultimately impact the coordination of the eyes. So you have trouble with reading because there's a high demand there. So look, what happens with these kids is they can adapt usually for a while, and then some demand puts them, it just stops them. They cannot overcome the demand. And so maybe back in the day when they didn't have to sit in school, they could maybe push around that some. Maybe they kept on changing and adapting. I'm sure some kids did that. But nowadays, the demand, because of our academics and stuff like that, where they're forced to sit in a classroom and listen and view stuff, it's just, the demands are too high. Okay. All right. All right, so the function of the nervous system is to perceive the environment and coordinate behavior of all other cells. All right, so our brains are taking in information from the body, internally and externally, and they're creating behaviors because of what's going on. All right, and so I want you to think about that, because behaviors they have a purpose, right? There's a reason for our behaviors, and if we have an altered sense of self, or we have an altered sense of our external or internal environments, it ultimately alters the coordination and the behavior of our cells and our, just our person. And so look, everybody knows about the eyes, ears, nose, taste. Okay, well, there's other senses. There's body positioning sense. There's the vagus nerve, which is the nerve that runs into your gut and tells your body what's going on. There bacteria overgrowth, or are we encountering these viruses? Are we digesting? Are we pooping? What is going on? It's telling our internal sense what is going on. And then there's the balancing system. And so our brain uses these 8+ senses to create our world. Now, everybody knows about the eyes, ears. Okay, so just imagine you've lost some sense that you're now accustomed to, right? Let's just say you had 20/20 vision, and now it's cut in half, right? It's not as good. Well, that alters how you navigate the world, right? Here's the problem with these kiddos, because most of them, right? Most of them that we're seeing now were born with these, with the poor vision, with the altered sense, right? They don't know the difference. So they don't know how to explain the difference. They don't understand, some of these kids are, like we're talking about that vagus nerve and internal, they don't know that every time you eat pizza, you don't feel bloated and disgusting, right? They haven't put that together, because every time they eat pizza their entire life, they've always felt bloated and disgusting, and their behavioral changes, right? They don't know that. They don't know that the difference, right? Because they've never felt good. They don't know what it's like to have 20/20 vision and then go to 20/40 or whatever it is. And so, look, all I'm saying here is behaviors. There's a reason. there's an altered perception. And a lot of times these kiddos, what you'll see is when they're altered perception, even with body awareness and body coordination, body timing, remember that when I talked about that going to the restroom, it causes what's called dysmetria of thought, which is uncoordinated thought processing. And what you'll oftentimes see with these kiddos is they do not understand why they're in trouble, because in their mind, what their behavior made sense. Okay? So, and you'll see this oftentimes too with, you have to remember, these kids, their behavior has a purpose, right? So they'll behave in a manner to gain control of their environment, to help regulate their environment. They'll deflect. And so you'll get kiddos who, I punched Johnny in the face because he was, he was too close to me, and his presence and there's too much visual and auditory processing. So he punches Tommy. But because of the dysmetria of thought, it made sense to me. So I don't understand why, I don't understand why I'm getting in trouble. You get what I'm saying here? Look, the body is using internal and external sensors to understand what's happening in the environment. And if the senses are altered, or the vision isn't clear, the way you navigate the world is like somebody who has poor vision, right? It's not clear. What made sense to you with the poor vision doesn't make sense to somebody with 20/20 vision. I hope you understand that. All right. We're going to skip this. All right, subluxation. So this is a chiropractic term. This is what chiropractors look for in the spine. Basically, it's altered tone, structural tone, so locking, fixing, twisting sort of thing that's altering our central structure. All right, dyskinesia. So, it's not uncommon for patients to come in and say, hey, I feel stuck in my mid-back or my neck, or, this is this. But kiddos can have a lot of fixation, their whole spine. So the center, we work from the center out, right? You gain control of your core, and then your limbs are built off of that core and function off that core. So kiddos with poor body movement, right, who struggle with handwriting, who couldn't kick a soccer ball to save their life, right? Their core, their center, their spine on out is stuck, fixated, poor tone. So there's not a lot of tone in there, or poorer tone there. And so we have this dyskinesia, which is locking, fixing. And basically what's happening with the locking and fixing is we're trying to compensate for poor reception, so poor awareness of the spine, also in poor input and poor tone. Tone meaning like a tone of a muscle, right? And so this is big. This is telling you something. This fixation and this locking up of the spine is really saying, I don't have enough information, I don't have enough tone here, so I'm going to lock it up in order to protect myself and in an attempt to navigate my environment more efficiently. So this is kind of one of the first things that we're seeing in kiddos as far as they're locking up their spine, their central portion, to work on their limbs and use other things more efficiently. Well, that's not good. You need movement of your spine for information and for stimulation of your brain. Kiddos, ADHD kiddos who are always moving, are attempting in part to stimulate their brain through movement. That's what they're doing. So if their spine's all locked up and they're being wiggly and stuff, they're trying to get info or drive stimulus to the brain. All right. Here's a C-section video. I'm just checking on time here. I'm going to make this a few more minutes, and then I'm going to be done. So I'm going to kind of hurry through these last few points. But I hope this has been very insightful for you. So look, if conception is great, no stress, perfect, that alone right there could cause the whiplash injury, right? That didn't look very kind. It looked rough, right? So look, if you could cause neck injury to a 22-year-old and cause the eyes, imagine if the neck injury happens, minute 1 into life. Could it impact the eyes? Absolutely. All right. So yeah, twisting, turning, lots of leveraging of the head to pull out the body. So they're using the head to literally pull out the rest of the body. That's not a large incision, by the way. So they're literally pulling, they're tractioning the skull. Could cause that. Our rate of C-section is going up. That's 2012. So I've heard upwards of 34 to 30%, 37%. I'm not saying there's not a reason for C-sections, okay? There are life-saving reasons for C-sections. However, if it's not a life-saving procedure, you should at least know that it could cause the sprain strain at the top of the neck and ultimately alter some of the function of the kiddo's neck. The most common thing we see with kiddos who are C-section babies or really long labored or even quick, but who have some sort of trauma at birth is they don't like to feed on one side or the other. It hurts to turn one way or the other. Well, if you just got pulled out of your out like this, right? You may have some soft tissue damage. It may hurt. You may lock up, and it may not feel good to turn to the left or the right. But that's not being explained. So, C-sections, I understand, have a purpose, and there's certainly a place for them. I'm not making the argument that there should never be a C-section, but I'm just telling you that, look, there's consequences for this sometimes, and they can be devastating. And maybe torticollis would be a good one, right? Unfortunately, what they used to do is go in and actually clip the muscle. It's pretty crazy. They go clip the muscle, and then good luck with function 20 years down the road. Now they're doing a little bit more PT, maybe occasionally go to a chiropractor, but or be referred to a chiropractor. You should definitely go to a chiropractor if you have a torticollis. But look, you could see where that can happen. That trauma can happen. I don't have the book in front of me. It's Manual Therapy in Children by Dr. Biederman, who's a German doctor of osteopathy. And I think this is his study. But anyways, he did one similar to this. If this isn't him, I can't see up there at the top. But he found the same thing. Basically, 98, 99 out of 100 kids have some form of that dyskinesia in the upper neck. All right, just afferentation. So this is information going to the brain from the body, okay? So am I getting good input or am I getting bad input? Think of it as eyesight. Is there enough light for me to understand my environment, or is there not enough, right? Okay, and so this is the example, right? In my house, I know how to navigate my house in the dark, okay? You'll see kids, they can become very efficient at going through things that they know. The moment they're in a place that they don't know, their inefficiencies, it just shows, right? So basically what I mean is you'll have this kid and they go into something new like a sport or dance, and they cannot dance for their life. Well, they may have some history of, obviously walking and stuff like that, but the moment they're in a new environment and the demand to coordinate physical movement with auditory processing, done deal. It's like being in a pitch black, new home that you had no idea where it was, okay? And so they don't have a clear vision of their body. They don't understand it. It's very complicated. This afferentation oftentimes leads to dysmetry of thought, so the coordination of thought. Very interesting. And also sometimes this can come across as nociception or really pain. And so I've read upwards of maybe 30 to 40% of kiddos, maybe even 50% of kiddos with sensory issues, autism, stuff like that, have some pain. And if you've ever had a cast, over a break, yes, there's some initial pain, but after the break has started healing, your joints will ache, right? And the aching comes from the lack of movement in the joint, okay? And so the brain's trying to get information. What is going on with that finger? Why isn't it moving? I want to understand. It wants the movement. We have a bunch of receptors all over our joints that are trying to get information for how we're navigating in space. Because ultimately, our brains don't know it's 2020. And guess what's important for survival in 200 AD? Movement. I need to get away from that lion. I need to move efficiently, okay? So the prefrontal cortex, the part of our brain involved with executive function, says, look, I don't move well through this environment because I don't know where my right and left hand are, and I can't even march in place. I've seen it. I need to take from here to monitor this, okay? For instance, I had a kid who came in and he could not do this. He started going all over the place. Real smart kid, figured out how to do it. But once I had him close his eyes, he had to reset and figure it out because it's all over the place. Look, this is very, very important. You have to, if this is not investigated and we're, looking into this, then this ultimately impacts a sense and the sense of self. Okay, we're going to skip over this. My battery's actually dying. And so I need to hurry up. Anyways, proprioception and perception of movement. 60% of movement and body awareness comes from the spine. 33% comes from up here. So remember the birth trauma injuries? 33% of that information could be altered, lost, or not lost, but like corrupted information. All right, so again, that subluxation is a I say misalignment, just think fixed, locked joint, okay, with altered sense of information going to the brain. Dysautonomia, this is a big one, okay? The autonomic nervous system is part of our fight or flight and our rest and relaxation and healing. This is essentially kind of the stress part of our nervous system, okay? It's involved with resting, breathing, heart rate, all of this stuff. It's involved with sleep and digestion. These kiddos, when they get stressed out, they get dysautonomia. Dysautonomia leads to what you see, this champion growth and protection mode at the same time. So the protection mode is that fight or flight mode. Okay, that's a dysautonomia. It means my body is ready to fight, punch Johnny, not break down my food and digest it well, get the nutrients from it. It's not going to do that. It's going to stay in protection mode and survival. Alter sleep. Sleep and ADHD, or poor sleep and ADHD, look very similar. Poor sleep impacts memory. Poor sleep, that's the non-REM sleep. Poor REM sleep alters our ability to emotionally regulate. So we have kiddos with dysautonomia who are not sleeping well, their memory is being impacted, and they struggle with their emotional control and regulation. Dysautonomia, I'm not saying, look, there's variations of this, but ultimately what can happen is when you put kids on the ADHD medication, you'll get a good autonomic score. See it all the time. You take them off, tanks. Put them back on, good. Take them off, tanks. Boom. And so you got these kids who are going boom, 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 boom. And we wonder why they struggle and they feel like zombies. All right. Gonna skip over that. The vagus nerve is part of that. So it's the opposite part of the fight or flight. It's the rest, relaxation, and healing. This is a huge nerve. They think it's involved with cancer, rheumatoid arthritis, and healing and digestion, and it's involved in the immune system. So it's a big nerve. So that dysautonomia is dysfunction of the vagus nerve. And if you're not familiar with that nerve, it's a big nerve. You can look it up, but it's a very vital nerve for internal awareness, what's going on with our gut, our heart rate, how are we digesting, what bugs are we fighting, all of that stuff. And if that nerve is not functioning well, we will struggle. All right, dysphonesis. This is a poor use of energy, okay? So we have too much energy being utilized to move and coordinate the system, okay? You'll see kiddos who are struggling with poor movement mechanics, dyskinesia, all Afferentiation, and they have Dysphonisis. So they use a lot of energy to do something. So when they sit there, we have a baseline score of 100. They're doing 231. They're doing 300. They have autism. They're doing 400. They're using extraordinary amounts of energy to do something relatively easy, like sit. Okay, and you're like, okay, so what does that mean? I always say it's like something costs $1 here, and you go to Spain, right? And it costs $4 there. You get to go to Spain, but it costs a lot more money. Food's more expensive. You're not going to have as many. You can't go out and just gorge yourself. Versus in Spain, they come here and it's $1. Boy, they're living the good life. $4 for something there, it's $1 here. We'll take 4 of them. So when they're required to do things, they're already burning more energy. They're already utilizing more resources to do something. Guess what? They're not going to have energy to do: heal, rest, relax, all of that other stuff. So dysautonomia and dysphonisis and all this stuff. This is coming together. Not one of these things equals a diagnosis. And let me preface this right here: I am not diagnosing any of these children. I'm a functional doctor. I want to make sure that the dysphonesis and the dysautonomia and all the other stuff that you can see that we're testing, the whatever, is coming together and trying to create some harmony within the body so they can function better, and ultimately we see improvement of what's going on with them, right? So I don't diagnose any of the kids. I am simply looking for how are the kids functioning and what can we do to try to improve that function, make them more efficient, right? Help them get out of the primitive reflexes, help their gross motor movement, their fine motor movement, which ultimately impacts their eyes and their balance. And so these are all very important things. All right, so in the end, these kiddos are disconnected, all right? And when they're disconnected, we see all sorts of symptoms, right? there's three perfect storm kiddos that we typically see. We see the raging bull, which is just the kiddo with no emotional regulation, who's all over the place, right? Just high energy, poor emotional control, maybe poor body. Well, that's more of the drunken bull, but just kind of all over emotionally and physically. Then we have the drunken bull. This is the kiddo with no body awareness, all over the place. Maybe he's in your face, right? Doesn't know the boundaries, right? The social boundaries, because they have no awareness of themselves. They don't have awareness of you. If a child doesn't know where they are in space, they don't know that being in your face is not appropriate. So the drunken bull, right? And then you have the raging drunken bull, who's just physically all over the place, just wound up and completely uncoordinated, no, poor social, poor mechanical, just kind of all over and you can see it in them, right? They're just amped up. They don't have emotional regulation. They're poorly coordinated. All of this stuff is happening, and all the symptoms are pointing in this direction of dysautonomia, dysphonesis, dyskinesia, all of this stuff. All right. So actually, I just want to show you this real quick, and then I'm going to end this because my battery's about to die. This is an EMG. So when I talked about the energy, the dysphonesis and the energy output, this is a kiddo. The left one is the initial. The follow-up one is on the right. We're burning an extraordinary amount of energy. Okay? Burning a ton of energy. These muscles are being lit up. They're using 231 times, so 2.3 times the amount of energy to sit there. And as you break it down, you can see that there's a change in what's happening. So that there's birth trauma and sensory issues based off of this, and they're struggling to survive. Go back to this one. This one's a thermal, so this is autonomic function. And we can see sensory and anxiety. So these are the type of scans that we utilize to help find the dysphonesis, the dyskinesia, the dysautonomia, and ultimately, when you look at all this stuff, you can paint a picture of dysfunction. And if we can work on the dysfunction, ultimately we can help the kiddos. All right, so I burned through this because I wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to kind of talk about this all. But look, if you need to ask me questions, please call or text me at 972-387-4700, 972-387-4700, and we could talk about this. Because if your kiddo is struggling, ultimately there's probably some form of this manifesting it, dysautonomia, dysphonesis, dyskinesia, all of that manifesting itself, ultimately impacting the sensory system of the body and impacting the information going to the brain. And because of that, we're seeing symptoms. All right, this is Dr. Brian with Dallas Synergy Chiropractic. I hope this helped. If I can help you, call me at 972-387-4700. You can email me at dallassynergychiropractic@gmail.com, and please let me know what you think. I really hope you enjoyed this.